Serious, what is an experience you've had that you cannot logically explain? Had a dream where someone interrupted my dream to tell me I only had 6 months left. 6 months after I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was the harmless type, and this was 15 years ago, but it still freaks me out to this day. There's actually another case like this. A lady who heard a voice told her to go to the hospital and get her brain scanned. Sure enough, there was a tumor. She got surgery to have it removed. In recovery, the voice said, "Sorry for scaring you. This will be the last you hear from us." I have been wondering a bit about this recently. I wonder if our bodies can maybe communicate with our conscious mind to tell us that we have life-threatening disease. In my case, I noticed over the last few years that I was becoming more interested in death and dying than I previously had been. This year I found I had an aggressive tumor, and I have spent the last 9 months going through cancer treatment that has probably been successful. There may well have been an evolutionary advantage to knowing that you might die from an illness that you did not know about. Time to sort out your affairs, childcare, etc. Perhaps my body simply hadn't kept up with the possibility that modern medicine had a solution, but was trying to warn me. I don't know, but our bodies are pretty amazing. I'm not religious, but I dreamt an angel came down from the sky calling my name. At first I was hiding, but she smiles and said, "2 more years. I'm still spook. I might have a heart condition," and took an appointment with the document. I'm just 36, dropping a quarter-sized object and it just was gone. I looked all over the general area when I dropped it. Never found it. I was working at Toys R Us in the late 90s. It was late fall and we were running small night crews, 4-5 guys, in preparation for the Xmas rush. One night I'm the only one who shows up. Closing manager tells me I can split if I don't want to be alone in the building all night. You got locked in. I'm fine with it. Actually thought it would be kind of cool. They close up, set the alarm and leave. I'm now alone until 7 AM. We would usually dial up the store intercom and broadcast a radio over it to stop the crappy music from playing, or for latest light hits. I grab the radio and dial up the intercom and set it up. The next few hours were quiet and uneventful until suddenly I hear a click and the music starts again. I go over to the front desk where I had the radio and it's still there playing. The phone is still off the receiver, right next to where I left it. Okay. I radio the intercom and head back to the aisle I was working in. Not even 20 minutes later a click and again the music starts. I go back to the desk. Nothing has moved or anything, radio still playing, receiver still off the hook. Let me be clear, this has never happened before. We had been doing the trick with the intercom for weeks at this point, and never did it ever just hang up on its own like that, ever. I'm starting to get a little freaked out now. It's like 3 AM at this point, and I still got a few hours to go. But I'm telling myself, it must just be the phone. Let me move to a different location. So I head over to a random register and set it up. It's fine for like 2 hours or so before a click. Okay, now I'm officially freaked out. It's like someone is hanging up the receiver with their finger. I head over to the sporting good aisle and grab a wooden t-ball bat and start walking the whole store. Is someone in here fucking with me? I walk the whole store and warehouse. Nothing. Not a soul. I tried to get back to work and just leave the music on, but I could not focus. The hair on the back of my neck would not go down. And I just fucked off to the manager's office at the front of the store and locked myself in until the morning crew showed up at 7. For the rest of the season we continued the trick with the radio, and it did not repeat what happened that night. Not once. Not ever. It only happened that one night I was alone in the store. Can't explain it. Only tangentially related, but your story reminded me of a thing. I used to work in a thrift store. Most often, my job was to tend to the donation door, so when people came to drop stuff off, I would help them bring their things inside. Then I'd sort it into our various bins and do a preliminary quality control. We closed at 9 o'clock, but after about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, there was very little to do. Even so, someone would have to be around for the very occasional donations that did come in. After about 7 o'clock, the person working the closing shift in the donation center would be on their own back there. When it was my night to close, it was always pretty boring, and I would just look for busy work to kill time. Sweeping the floor, organizing the ever-present mess of donations, whatever. For some reason, it was only during the later parts of the evening that anything paranormal would happen. The door where people dropped off their donations was an automatic sliding door like you often see at the entrance to stores. And in the evening, the sensor that opened the door would often trip when there was nobody there to set it off. Similarly, there was a phone right by the door, and it would sometimes ring, but when I answered it, there wouldn't be anyone on the other end. It wasn't uncommon, as I was helping people unload their donations, for them to tell me they were donating the belongings of a recently deceased relative, so I'm completely convinced that there were ghosts all up in that place. I know the feeling. The building I work in has this issue with the sliding door. The outer doors locks at 8 PM, but the inner doors stay unlocked. Sometimes around 1 AM or 2 AM the inner door will open like someone just walked past it. Once the locked outer door slid open like someone walked up to it. That night I cut power to the doors for the rest of the shift. Same with the phone, except we can see who is calling in, whether it is an outside line, or if it is coming from in the building. At least once a week there will be a call from one of the offices in the middle of the night. The first night it happened I assumed it was housekeeping. Next morning I spoke to head of housekeeping and was told all housekeeping leaves at 8 PM. Same with kitchen staff and maintenance. Management is out the door by 5 PM. Only staff in the building after 8 PM is myself and a handful of nurses, and it can't be any of them as they are on another floor. I have the only key to the offices the call comes from, and I would see if anyone entered or exited the offices. I worked nights at an office depot in the early 2000s. There were 2, at most 3 of us locked in the store overnight. The manager would let us out at 6 AM. No one could come in or out without setting off the alarm. It started with footsteps down the hallway. My coworker and I would be in the back office printing signs and all of a sudden you'd hear someone walking down the hallway towards us. One of us would peek out and there was no one there. One night we are working, and around 3 AM the store phone keeps ringing. My coworker finally picks it up, listens for a few seconds then says, "Sorry, you have the wrong number," and hangs up. Rings again. Same girl. He hangs up. Calls again. This time he puts her on speaker. She's crying, sobbing, "Why won't you talk to me? What's wrong with you?" Coworker, "Ma'am, you have the wrong number. Stop calling." He hangs up. He looks at me and says, "This is fucking weird, man." I tell him it's just some crazy chick calling. No biggie. Phone rings again. He puts it on speaker. "I'm not crazy." Click, she hangs up and never calls again. Scared the ever-loving shit out of us. One night I'm stocking the supply side of the store, envelopes, and stuff like that. My coworker comes running over from tech and heads to the next aisle over. He says there is someone in the store. I think he's messing with me, but he's clearly disturbed by it. We search the store and no one is there. I asked what he saw, and he says there was a man walking parallel to me on the next aisle. He was up on the ladder stocking printers and saw him. He was extremely spooked by this. One night 3 of us are working together on one aisle, goofing off really, and we hear man's voice on the other side of the store yell out, "What the hell?" at the top of his lungs. It scared all of us so badly we called the morning manager. He was not happy and told us to quit fucking around. When I took off 2 weeks for my honeymoon, the guy they got to cover for me lasted 1 week before he quit. I ran into him a few weeks after I got back and asked him what happened. He said he couldn't do it. He kept seeing people standing there out of the corner of his eye, but when he looked there was no one there. The night crew stopped when I left. My coworker quit, and they hired a woman to replace him. Her second night she came up to me and said the back of her neck was on fire. I looked and she had these fresh, deep red scratches running from her neck to the middle of her back. It scared the hell out of her. That was the last straw for me. I quit a few days later. Okay, so here's my possible logical explanation. There's a timeout on how long the intercom system stays active. You were alone so nobody else used the intercom. When your colleagues were in, they might have made some internal calls which cold reset the timeout clock, allowing it to continue broadcasting your music uninterrupted. While that is a good explanation, one I considered, here is why it can't be. The intervals at which the timeout occurred were vastly different. A few hours, 20 minutes, 2 hours. Why would a timeout be so erratic? Wouldn't it be a uniform length of time? It was a tiny crew of 4 to 5 guys. We worked all together in the assigned section for that night, so no one was using the intercom to make section to section calls. There would be no reason to. Plus the general intercom broadcasting the music locked out any other pages. Little late, but when I was younger I always saw the same person in my dream. It wasn't the generic man picture all over the internet. The person was hunched over, much more than normal, and had massive teeth and eyes. These dreams slowly turned to nightmares, and I was very scared. One morning I woke up after having a normal, not scary dream, and there it was, for a split second. After I had that experience I never had a dream of it again, so that's good I guess. TL. Doctor, I saw my nightmare when I woke up, and then I never saw it in my dreams again. I was taking my kid to a doctor's appointment, and as we were walking from the car everything around us just stopped. It was only for just a brief moment, and then everything went back to normal. What was weird was everything went silent too, which never happens there, since it was right by one of the busiest intersections in town. I could also blow it off as just my imagination, but as soon as it happened my kid asked me if time just stopped. So this is sort of different, but one time I took my kid to get crickets for their lizard. The road to the pet store had construction for about 2 blocks, then maybe 2 more until the shop with no construction. We drove slowly through it, workers, signs, etc everywhere. Got to the store, she ran in and got crickets, no line, less than 2 minutes. On the way back the road was totally clear, not even a hint of construction. We still talk about this 2 years later. This exact same thing happened to a friend and I. It was at night, and not a busy area, but we were both there. All crickets, frogs, toads, even the breeze just froze for a while. Like someone hit mute on the entire world's remote. Only believe it was real, because I had a second party there, otherwise I'd have thought I temporarily lost my hearing. My stepsister had this talent, except all the time. She could hear faint music playing when radios were turned off, as easily as if they were on. It was really cool, but I never thought it was paranormal per se. Music is always playing around us that we can't hear without receivers, but maybe she was sensitive to it in a way most people aren't. Something in her brain ears/even fillings are observed phenomenon that another commenter has pointed out. We as people just don't know how or why it happens right now. I wish I could ask her more questions about it, but we were teens, and she has since passed. I hope there's lots of music where she's at now. I do this thing where I'll hum a tiny bit of a tune from one of the shows that my 4-year-old watches on repeat. Manners You're Welcome, for example. I'll leave my wife alone for hours. We don't even have to be in the same room, but we'll both sing the exact same bit of the song at the same time spontaneously. It's like the song has been playing in our subconscious on repeat for hours at normal speed, and you can only stand it for so long before you have to let it out. It's funny the things the subconscious picks up on and obsesses over. I had a similar situation in 2017. I was fine. Then all of a sudden I couldn't read. Everything else was fine. Didn't feel ill. My vision was clear. But when I looked at a word I could only see the first 2 letters and the rest was smudged over with its surroundings. No matter how hard I focused I could not make out the middle or end of the words. It fixed itself after an hour or so, and didn't happen since. This happened to me in 2018. I'm 33 years old, female with no prior issues like this. I got out of bed. It was a Sunday, so I went downstairs to bring some snacks back up to bed to nibble on while I relaxed. I felt extremely sick all of a sudden and went into the bathroom and threw up around me. I stumbled back into the bedroom and my wife asked me if I was okay. I couldn't speak. I tried to get some words out but physically couldn't. I also couldn't move one side of my body. I kind of just collapsed into bed and had this crazy headache I've never experienced before. My wife just assumed I wasn't feeling well and let me rest. A few minutes later I was able to speak again. Anyway, being a dumb 31 years old I put it down to just feeling unwell and got on with my week. Something told me to speak with my GP and one-sided he referred me for an MRI and blood tests. The results came back clear and they narrowed it down to a migraine. It gave me comfort to an extent, but still to this day I had all the signs of a Shire. But I guess the MRI results don't lie and that's what it was. One summer when I was a teenager, my cousin came to visit with her then infant son, and my mom took the two of them to the zoo. My mom told me to call on my cousin's phone if I was going anywhere, since my mom wasn't bringing her phone with her. About an hour later I decided to bike to my friend's house. I instinctively called my mom on her phone to let her know, forgetting that she didn't have her phone with her. Once I remembered, I hung up and started to dial my cousin's number. Then the phone rang. It was my mom's number. Somehow, her phone called me back on its own, even though it was in her car, which was locked, and in front of the house. I ran outside to confirm this. To this day, I have no idea how her phone was able to call me back. And no, I didn't answer the call. I've had it happen to me too. If you didn't actually hear any noise from the other end, it was probably just a bug in how your provider handles calls, and it basically went like, hey wait, wasn't there supposed to be a call between X and Y? Shit, better open the line again. I've had it happen where I hang up at the right time, it calls back, and the other person also picks up. I thought they called me back, they thought I called them, which I did a second earlier. I was a passenger in a car accident. After impact, I saw a bright light and a series of memories appeared quickly one by one, almost like snapshots. I always figured that this is what people meant when they said their life flashed before their eyes. I felt like I was supposed to die that night and somehow got a second chance. I was driving to a running workout at 4:30 am and passed the high school stadium near my house. There was a football game being played with a stadium full of fans. It made no sense at all. I kinda wonder if I was hallucinating. To this day I don't know why that was happening then. I dreamt about a friend of mine I hadn't met in more than a year. Covered. In my dream we were in a dining room, but time and space didn't exist. We were sitting around a round table, raised our glasses in commemoration, and she looked happy. The next day she texted me asking to meet for dinner. We sat around a round table, we raised our glasses, and she looked as happy as in my dream. I keep finding myself in places that I dreamt of, but these dreams always have weird realism / lucid / vivid feeling that is beyond my words. Just now at this time in my life I'm living and working at a place I dreamt of a year or two ago. That dream sat in my mind for a while. So cool. I simply trust these weird occurrences and try to pay attention to details. I often dream of places before I visit them. For a while there it was obscure spots on trips to foreign countries, a toilet in London, a rural road in Thailand, a ski resort town convenience store, a neighborhood in China I had never seen in photos, but moved into 2 weeks later. I think of it as remembering things that haven't happened yet. I think we briefly cross into the eternal space sometimes when we dream, so linear time is just less linear. A part of us exists eternally on the other side of reality. Sometimes we merge with that part, briefly, and remember things that haven't happened yet. So, to preface this story, I have schizoaffective disorder, meaning I have the hallucinations and delusions of a schizophrenic, but they are all affected by a mood disorder. So back in my junior year, I remember going into a serious panic attack and I hid under the computer desk, just staring into space trying to calm down. Two of the voices were talking to me, and I couldn't seem to calm down. One of them then said, "Wait here, I'll go get someone," which didn't make any sense to me because he isn't real and no one else can see him. 2 seconds later, a guy from my class was kneeling down in front of me, asking if I was having a panic attack, because, apparently, people in his family did. A couple hours later, I get to a class where we had a test that I totally forgot about. I was sitting at the desk in class, about to have another panic attack, because I didn't know the answers. I then heard one of the voices say, "Okay, we are getting you out of here," and I'm like, "How?" Then the fire alarm goes off. Keep in mind, I had no clue that we were having a fire drill that day, much less in that period. So I got about a 15-minute break outside, and then I was able to go back and complete the test without a panic attack. The overlap between mental health disorders and supernatural occurrences is way too foggy to study, but there are so many fascinating stories like this. I don't envy the position you are in. I wear a sun symbol necklace. It was handmade out of a single bit of metal and has a loop at the top to thread a cord or chain through. I was walking along with my daughter on my shoulders when I hear a ting on the floor in front of me. I look down and my necklace sun symbol is on the floor. I check the cord around my neck. It is still tied and in one piece, so I check the symbol. The metal loop is still solid. WTF, how did the symbol detach from the cord without breaking the cord or the loop? To this day I have no clue. Ordered pizza and put 3 slices on a plate. Went to sit down with it to watch TV, and when I went for a slice, nothing was on the plate. Went to the pizza box and saw it was complete. No sign of disturbance. Took 3 slices again and then looked at it until I sat down and went to get a slice. Plate was empty and went to look at the box and saw the pizza was still whole. I just ate there and then took a nap. I went to my doctor the next day to see if I suffered a stroke or I may have suffered a memory lapse thing. All okay. An animal skull that I had sitting on top of the TV went flying across the room. It rose about an inch into the air and then flew like someone had thrown it. I was not the only witness. I was home alone once and had been watching ghost hunter stuff at age 10 or something. I thought it'd be funny to say if anyone's here, prove it. A birthday card on the mantle just fell off at that very second. It wasn't balanced weird or anything. I fucking bolted out of the living room and upstairs very quickly. In the mid 90s, I was about 14. My family took a weekend trip to Nashville to go to Opryland. The night before we go, I had a terrible nightmare that the shoulder harness on a roller coaster we were riding was faulty and I fell out. So the next day at the park, my mom sees and I get on the exact same roller coaster. I sat in the car in front of them by myself and the shoulder harness would not lock in place. I freak out. The ride is about to start. I start screaming. A ride operator comes over and manually locks the harness in place so the ride can begin. When we get off the ride, they shut off that car so no one else can ride it. I will never again ride an upside down roller coaster. My wife had passed away 3 or 4 days earlier. I'm standing in the kitchen at the stove and my daughter is behind me. All of a sudden I turn around real quick and say to her, "Did you just touch my back?" That's when I see she couldn't have because she is at the sink at least 5 feet away. It felt like a hand had rested itself on the small of my back. I know what I felt that day and I still don't know for sure what it was, but in my mind I will always be convinced it was my wife. My sweetheart passed away in August. The day he died our alarm for the driveway had a spaz out and went off like 5 times in a row. Then my ceiling fan got off balance in the middle of the night like something bumped it. Both of those things haven't happened before or since and you can't convince me it wasn't my love saying goodbye. I'm really sorry about your wife, it's a different kind of pain. A few years ago I had a couple of friends over my apartment. It was late at night and we were outside smoking cigarettes, having a couple drinks and just talking. One of us saw a plane in the sky and joked about it being a UFO. It was pretty bright and was moving kind of weird, but we didn't think much of it. Again, we only jokingly said it was a UFO. Then a second craft came into view and they were both just kind of flying around each other. Still figured it was a plane or a helicopter, but because of how they were moving we were all kind of looking at each other like, no, I'm sure it's not. Then, also seemingly out of nowhere, what I can only describe as sparks began spewing out of the first craft we saw. It looked like it had been hit by something mid-air. That's when all let out a synchronized what the fuck. The craft began to fall while these sparks continued to spew from it. It was night out, so they were bright against the dark sky. It almost looked like when a transformer blows up and sparks fly from it, but in the sky. By this time we were bracing for an explosion as it hit the ground. The other craft seemed to be following the first one as it fell. Then it flew in the other direction and took off. We never heard a crash and we tried searching online for any news of an airplane crash, but we never saw anything. I'm not saying it was aliens, but I had a dream, weird details aside, that my wife's friend was having an affair and going to leave her husband and their basement had flooded, so we came over to help. I told my wife, we laughed, then she was telling her friend about it, and her friend shockingly admitted she was having an affair and 2 years earlier the basement of their townhouse flooded. After that they kept pestering me if I've had dreams like that before, which I have, just not to that level of secretive stuff. Fast forward several years, friend gets remarried, my wife and I have a child, and friend and new husband announced they are pregnant too. A couple months later I had a dream our child was waving goodbye to friend, and everything felt sad. The next day friend went to the hospital and found out her baby was missing several chromosomes for developing a normal heart and brain, and the rest is just sad news. I felt so awful for them because they're wonderful people and they were so excited to have a baby too. One time when I was a kid, I was playing a board game with my brothers. As we were setting up, I dropped a playing piece onto the carpet and it bounced underneath the bed. When all three of us went to look under the bed, it wasn't there. We looked for it everywhere, even the places that didn't make any logical sense. It wasn't anywhere. The board game piece bounced into the abyss, and we never recovered it. I was driving with my wife in the car on a dark rural road, very starry night. I noticed a huge spot off to my right where there were no stars, just black, like a giant oval hole in the sky. Then suddenly it shot off to the left and disappeared. We hadn't been married long, so I didn't want her to think I was a nut, so I just asked, "Did you see that?" She had no idea what it was. Not saying this is what happened to you, but I listened to a USAF Super Hornet pilot on a podcast talk about night vision flying. Their goggles are very sensitive, so much so they can see campfires dozens of miles away when flying over national park forest. To mess with them as a joke amongst pilots, they would approach the campfire/campers then cut the engine a few miles out, so the plane was silent. They'd drift right over the campers as just a black figure in the night sky and then hit the afterburners and go straight vertical upwards and disappear into the night. He said it resulted in a bunch of UFO reports. Woke up in the middle of the night one day. My eyes were still foggy from sleep, but I could see the shape of a person standing in front of me. It looked like they were half crouched, with their hands on their knees and their head kind of tilted, as if they were trying to get a good look at my face. I remember being confused, because I thought it was my mom, and I was wondering why she was just looking at me like that. My eyes then adjusted, and I realized this person didn't have any features. It was like a shadow person, but was grey and static while looking. I got scared and closed my eyes hoping it would go away. I guess I must have fallen asleep after a while, because next thing I know it was morning. Definitely really weird. I have a ton of other weird experiences too that seemingly have no explanation. That was one of the creepiest. I don't think it was. I've had sleep paralysis before, but this was different. I could move. I remember pulling my blanket up a bit when I closed my eyes. I suppose it could have been partial sleep paralysis. Could have been a hypnagogic hallucination. I used to have them all the time, and still do sometimes. In essence, it's similar to sleep paralysis, minus the paralysis. You can see, hear, feel or smell things that don't exist. This is because your mind is both asleep and awake at the same time. For me, it's almost always bugs, like bees and wasps. New Year's Eve, 2016. I'm out downtown with my younger brother and a bunch of our friends. We are out bar hopping and having an excellent night. I get this awful panicked sinking feeling in my gut that says my mom is dead. With no words exchanged, my brother looks at me and says I think mom just killed herself. I'm instantly on the phone trying to get through to her. I call around 5 times with no answer, just praying to anything to move me to a different universe where this isn't happening. Then she picks up. She says she's fine and just had a few too many drinks, asks us how our night is going, wishes us a happy new year. I will never be able to shake that feeling or that experience. It was like a mutual nightmare. On a lighter note, I have a fun ability to predict what my dad ate for dinner. The other night I had a weird intrusive thought of my dad eating frozen lasagna while watching TV in the living room, so I messaged him saying I will make a prediction that you had lasagna for dinner. The response, how did you do that? I prefer the less scary premonitions. A car accident that didn't happen. I was about to make a turn. I looked both ways and saw absolutely zero incoming traffic. I turned right and bam, I'm hit and my front bumper comes off. There is zero reason for this accident to happen as the road had absolutely no cars on it and I could see down for a good quarter of a mile both ways. I'm dumbfounded. He asked how I didn't see him and I was in too much of a shock to answer. This accident could not have happened as there were no cars on the road. My eyesight is good, so I don't understand how I could miss an obvious car coming down the road. Speed limit was 35, so even a speeding car I would notice. His car only had a minor scrape, while my front bumper was torn off. Also my headlight was busted. He decided to just paint over it, but we exchanged our insurance info and went on our separate ways. I put my bumper into the back seat and went to work. I didn't get any phone call or anything regarding the accident. When I left work that afternoon, I noticed my bumper was now unattached. No signs of damage, no busted headlights, nothing. The notebook where I had written the guy's information no longer had it, and my phone, where I took pictures, the pictures were gone. To this very day I cannot explain it. Did I hallucinate an entire car accident? Imagined it? Or did the universe decide it really was impossible for the accident to happen, and thus reversed it somehow? I don't know. I cannot make any sense of it. Oh man, this one is crazy. Do you remember his name? Maybe look him up online. Any chance your job would have security footage of your car coming to work that day? Any coworkers witness the damage? Did you call or text a family member during the accident? When my friend died, I say friend, but we would have dated if the timing had been better. Feelings were mutual. A few days after his death I had cried myself to sleep. That night at sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke briefly and felt somebody's hand resting on my head, but it didn't bother me because I felt like I knew who it was. For the first time after his death, I slept soundly without waking up multiple times during the night. I was sitting at my desk at work when I suddenly felt really faint at around 10 AM. I just sat there, wondering what was happening to me, but it passed, and I continued on with my day as normal. Around 2:30 PM, I got a call saying my dad had had a major heart attack, but I still didn't make the connection until days later, when I found out the heart attack had happened at 10 AM that day. One night I was falling asleep, and suddenly sat up in bed knowing that one of my brothers was in a car accident. The next morning one of said brothers called me to tell me that he and his friends were run off the road and their SUV flipped 4 times. No one was hurt. They were run off at the same time that I woke up. Edit. Spelling. My twin sister died suddenly at the age of 50. 2 weeks after her death I get a text from her apologizing for our last argument, which I didn't get at the time nor responded to. She died with us still estranged. We were in a town outside Puerto Vallarta on holiday. In the middle of the outdoor market was a small church that we decided to check out. For some reason I felt really connected to it. I felt compelled to pray and light a candle. As we were leaving the church courtyard, a little girl across the small brick road was pointing at me, pulling her mother towards us, and she was calling me Coco Coco. The mother was pulling against her saying, Quien, no la conocemos quien es Coco. Who? We don't know her. Who is Coco? I froze. I locked eyes with the little girl. She was so excited and happy to see me. I didn't know her either, but I smiled to be polite. And in that moment it dawned on me. My little sister used to call me Coco when she was very little. I hadn't heard anyone say that name to me in over 30 plus years and had not thought about that nickname or told anyone about that nickname ever. It was alarming yet comfortably familiar. The little girl's mother pulled her along up the street and we went on our way. Years later my sister is getting really into genealogy and tracing our roots. She says 4 generations back, our dad's family is from that small town outside of Puerto Vallarta. Got a good one. Aside from ghost sightings from old military buildings. Woke up, my bed was soaked. I thought maybe I had peed myself. I was 19 at the time, but my clothes were 100% dry. So maybe I thought my clothes had dried. So I checked my underwear, and it was dry. Okay, so then maybe I sweat a lot and it just dried up. Normally when I have night sweats I'll have that district smell of salt, a little sticky, but nope. I was clean. As a last resort I smelled the bed, where it was wet. Dude, it was straight up water, literally water. It didn't smell like pee, and it didn't smell like sweat. I never found an explanation, and to this day it haunts me. Edit. Say someone played a prank on me, but why wasn't I wet? Edit. Guys, I never thought this was paranormal, never even crossed my mind, but you're making me freak out now. Oh, yes. That happened to me when I moved into a new place. Woke up to a wet puddle near my feet. I thought it was my cat having an accident due to the new environment. Had a sniff. Not urine. Water bottle up near my head, so no way it would have ended up down there, but it was definitely water. After mentioning it to a few people, I ended up getting a priest in to bless the house. Family are religious, and I thought there would be no harm in it. Priest blessed the house and that was that. What was weird though that afterwards, even though I was smoking inside, yes, not good, I would be puffing away and get suddenly hit with this floral aroma like perfume. So, I would say hello to the empty room, because if it was a spirit, they meant no harm. I'm neither here nor there with whether there are spirits around, but I thought I would be nice anyway. It never happened again after I moved out of that place. This happens around my house too. Yes, we have a dog, but she is 100% house trained and by your side at all times, so we know it's not her. Just a couple of weeks ago my wife asked me if I spilt something on the carpet upstairs in the landing. I didn't. There was no obvious leaks and we both smelt it and nothing. It's happened at least 5 to 6 times now. We moved in here around 3 years ago. It's actually caused minor arguments as my wife will assume I spilled water and just left it there to soak up, and vice versa. I don't believe in ghosts and the like, but it creeps me out. The most recent puddle on the carpet in the landing was quite significant too, like it felt like a full glass of water had been dropped on it. I used to live in a high-rise block of apartments in a kinda shitty neighborhood. One time I was about 16, smoking a cigarette down outside the main doors, waiting for a friend to pick me up. This guy who I see in and around the block all the time never speaks a word to me ever. He look 100% like he's on hard drugs. But anyway, this guy strolls on up to me and I'm thinking back, quote, oh here we go, he's gonna ask for a smoke and some change or whatever the case is, but nope. Dude grips the cigarette I'm smoking, it's past the halfway point at this point, and chucks it into his mouth like it's food and starts chomping away at it, starts swallowing over and over again because it's obviously burned his mouth and all the bits are stuck everywhere, walks off like nothing ever happened. Me and my mates live by the coast of Scotland. For fun when we was teenagers we would walk below the cliffs along the rocks doing parkour on the way. There was an open cave. It didn't go into the cliffs, so we decided to take a shortcut and go through the cave, only about 50 meters long at most. As we exited the cave we kept on walking below the cliffs for about a mile until we realized the tide was coming in fast, so we had to go back. We decided to go back through this cave again as it was quicker, but as we're about halfway in we all heard a little girl laughing, and it was very unsettling, didn't even sound human tbh, and we all just turned back and ran. We decided to just go around the cave and take the long route. Pretty freaky. Was in a kitchen with a few kitchen implements on the wall. A funnel fell off its hook, unlikely but not impossible, and flew 6 feet into the open oven. It was really weird. Once when I was little I was sleeping in my room, had a bad dream, so I woke up, saw a monster that looked gooey and shit in my hallway. I swear I must have been hallucinating, but I definitely wasn't dreaming cause I pinched myself and it hurt. Stayed in bed and just tried to ignore it staring at me. I have very other weird dream stories too. Like a lot of people say, if you die in a dream you die in real life, but I have died in dreams countless times. I also get weird moments where I swear I see the future in my dreams. I forget about it, but then when it happens I remember dreaming about it. 11 years old. Driving 1.5 hours away on a school trip. I see my very uncommon name, first and last, spray painted in reverse, like to be read in a mirror, on a tree in overpass. I have pictures of this to this day. I wonder if it means something, but not sure what. I'm 42 now. Still haunts me. TLDR. Weird voice saved autistic sister from drowning. One time when I was a teenager I was totally alone in my kitchen, and I had this extremely intrusive reoccurring thought slamming into my mind telling me that I needed to check on my older sister. My older sister is pretty severely autistic, has cerebral palsy, and epilepsy. Anyways, I was ignoring this thought telling me to check on her and continued my business, but something just kept telling me to check on her. After maybe a minute passed I heard this. I guess I was a voice, clear as day, like somebody was there in the kitchen with me. Check on your fucking sister. Fucking listen to me. Listen. Listen. Listen to me. Needless to say, it struck me hard enough to get me to stop whatever shit I was doing, and I went towards my sister's room calling for her. It's like I was guided to the bathroom with this weird watery splashing sound. so I diverted my direction from my sister's room towards the downstairs bathroom. My sister was having a seizure face down in the bathtub drowning. She wasn't even splashing or anything, so the water sounds are still weird to me. I was able to pull her out, and she was saved. I didn't save my sister that day. That fucking voice saved her. I wasn't even usually home, and my mom was drunk passed out in her bedroom. This was before I started drinking and using drugs myself, and generally going crazy, so I wasn't hallucinating. Something saved my sister and I have no fucking clue what. I can only explain it as God. I'll always believe there's a God, but I can't and won't even try to explain the craziness of there actually being some sort of higher power. Sister's alive and happy today and me and my mom are both sober now. I had a dream about my cat that I hadn't seen in a few weeks. In the dream I was walking down an alley to see a fortune teller. The fortune teller informed me that my cat was in a dumpster at the end of the alley, at which point I began to cry hysterically. Upon reaching the dumpster I pulled my lifeless cat's body from the trash and held him one last time. I noticed that he had one eye closed shut. The following day, in waking life, I decided to walk home from the gym along an unfamiliar path. As I walked I noticed an all-white cat matching my pace in the trees next to the sidewalk. This cat was making a fuss that I say hello to him, so of course I stopped and offered some pets. When the cat got up next to me, I noticed it only had one functioning eye. When I was 20 I saw an iridologist whose cure for every problem was several bottles of mysterious herbs and supplements from his shelves. Looking into my irises, he somehow managed to identify several injuries I had, including a healed knee injury from martial arts, and that I had scraped my arm that morning. I was wearing a sweater that I wasn't wearing when I scraped my arm, so he couldn't see it, and it didn't really hurt, so it's not like I was babying it. Same with the knee, it healed and there was no sign of it in my gait. He wasn't cold reading. He didn't toss out a bunch of diagnoses and a few hit. He didn't say much, but what he did say was pretty accurate. I've looked into iridology since then, and it seems like there's no scientific proof it's a thing. Since then I've met an acting coach who was super perceptive and regularly did the same Sherlock Holmes reads on me, so maybe he was just a super perceptive guy. I dunno. Iridology is weird. I have a flaw in my iris that indicates gallbladder difficulty. I had to have mine out in 2000. Not saying it's legit, but I wasn't a typical gallbladder patient, so that one dark spot matching up is pretty coincidental. Me and my stepsister played dumb supper one time at my aunt's house while we were alone. It's like a old wives' tale game to try and discover who you'll marry. How you play is you open all the doors and windows in the house, light a candle and cook a meal while completely silent. You set the table with a candle in the middle and 2 extra spots for the husbands. We didn't have actual candles, so we used an electric toy candle thing. According to the game, you know your husband has arrived when the candle blows out. Our electric candle went out. It definitely wasn't the batteries, because it could turn back. Before we left we made sure to close all the doors and windows, but the next day my aunt was mad at us for leaving her front door open. Not very interesting, or creepy I'll admit, but it's the best I got. My parents got the house exorcised by a priest. My mom claimed that seeing demons and being manic were unrelated. We just didn't argue. As the priest walked around the house, suddenly a flood of roaches spewed out from behind the priest, emerging from cracks in the pavement and fanning away from him like a wake, instantly disappearing as soon as they'd materialized. I've never seen insects act like one perfectly coordinated hive. Roaches scatter erratically and come in different sizes. These roaches were all exactly the same size and color and moved in perfect unison. It happened in seconds. My sister, also an atheist, saw it too, but everyone else had been walking alongside the priest. We later went back to investigate. We never saw a single roach in or around that basement before or since. Obvious explanation would be weird roach coincidence, but I just don't know. It was weird. I can explain it, but it's very rare that people will actually understand what I'm saying. But I used to work in cat rescue, and now I live by the sea. The sound of seagulls sounds close enough to the sound of a stressed cat that even from the deepest sleep I will spring out of bed ready for action. What action do I think I'm going to do? No idea. Why do I act like I'm shell shocked by the sound of cats when I never had bad experiences and even still have pet cats? Also no idea. Do seagulls actually sound like cats? Also no idea. Point I sometimes know when somebody has died. There's been a few celebrities I felt might, and days later they have. I also get out of situations where I feel I have done something or been to a place before I haven't. I knew when my mum would die. Guess the time. Right. Point I had daydreams of her getting cancer before it happened. I felt a vile feeling before we were told. My nan, uncle, granddad, and dog were dead also. Sometimes I just seem to know, and I hate it. I sometimes know when somebody has died. There's been a few celebrities I felt might, and days later they have. I also get out of situations where I feel I have done something or been to a place before I haven't. I knew when my mum would die. Guess the time. Right. Point I had daydreams of her getting cancer before it happened. I felt a vile feeling before we were told. My nan, uncle, granddad, and dog were dead also. Sometimes I just seem to know, and I hate it. Twice we've lost a dog in our house. The first time it happened we watched her go upstairs, but she never came back down. We really didn't think nothing of it, but then we all started to realize that we haven't seen her for a while, so we all went to go look. We searched the entire house, but we never found her. The second time was about the same, except she seemed to have disappeared somewhere between her food bowl and her bed. The time it happened, my brother was sitting in the room on the computer, so of course he didn't see anything. All he said was I heard her walking across the room. We never found her either. I had a friend that also had this happen to two pets when she was a kid. The first one a cat and the other one a free roaming rabbit. Turns out they didn't randomly disappear, but her fucked of a father was secretly picking them up and giving them away because he thought they were too much of a hassle to care for. Not even the mom knew of this. He admitted it years later, after a nasty divorce, quite casually during a scheduled custody visit. The thing is, it didn't even make sense with the rabbit, because he was one of three and the work they made was not much less with two. My only guess is that he would have given away all three of them, but never got the chance to secretly catch them without it being suspicious. Safe to say that custody visit was the last one my friend was attending. She was 16 by then, and she just flat out refused to meet the POS again. My vape needed charging. I went upstairs to fetch the charger, and when I came back down, could not find the vape. Never saw it again. I searched the small room and every bit of furniture for days afterwards. I still expect to find it one day. Wake up October 10th. 1992. 8-year-old me is sweating from the nightmare I just had. Go and find mom. Mom, I had a nightmare. We got in a car crash. She calms me down. Later same day, her office calls. Hey, we are getting rid of the fish tank. Do you want to take the fish home? Mom says yeah, I'm on the way. And load my brother and I into my dad's old Valiant. Halfway to her office, a woman wasn't paying attention and ran a red light, smashing into us and totaling the car. Inspection came away saying if we hadn't been in an old steel body car, all three of us would have been dead. Since then I trust my déjà vu and other small things my brain is trying to tell me. A number of synchronicities or meaningful coincidences. Here is one really weird example. Once, when driving home from work, I decided to pick a random 2-digit number and count how many times I see it in license plates of other cars, just for fun. I picked the number 86. I then saw 2 cars in a row with 86. I thought this was a pretty rare occurrence. The next morning, while driving to work, I saw a car with 8686. When I got to work, I saw a woman in a building with a shirt that had a large 86 on it. Amazed, I decided to look up the number 86 on a break to see if it had a special significance. Turned out 86 means nix or stop. This was really the first time I even learned of the word nix. And I'll be darned if I didn't see a license plate saying NIXX on the way home that day. I love things like this. I remember driving with my mum once, and we saw a car with the number plate BBQXXX. The X is just being 3 numbers. We were saying we'd never seen a BBQ number plate. 20 minutes later on the other side of town we say another car with the number plate BBQXXY. 1 number different. Our conclusion was they were probably related and had personalized BBQ plates. Still weird though. One time I was running a high fever, talking 40°C, so I was in that state where you are freezing, but at the same time boiling. It was hell. So I fell asleep and found myself in a cobblestone street with lots of fog, and I'm amazed because the temperature is not cold but also not warm either, so it is a little unsettling. So I decide to go down the street and I start hearing voices. Hello, I am here, can you see me? Help me. They are all yelling, and I see people just standing there in the fog looking at random places. So I come close and ask someone something, but they do not notice me, almost as if I was invisible to them, and they look desperate. This of course freaked me out, so I ran, and I ended up in some sort of DMV style building with a creature smoking a cigarette outside. It looked like one of those Mexican hairless dogs, but with spots that resembled a skeleton in his skin. I do not know why, but they seemed friendly to me. So, since I'm freaking out, naturally I went inside the building, only to find a busy waiting room with more of those creatures doing what public sector workers do best at the DMV, slacking off and chatting to each other. I take a number, 33. Alright, I suppose there's not a lot of people in front of me, and they were. The number in the screen was 5. So I sat down for literally 40 minutes waiting for my turn, and I get called by an elderly creature behind the front desk. It even had glasses and his bone markings were a little yellowish, like old bones. Name. I gave it my name. The creature types on the computer. Yeah, I don't have you on my system. May I have your death comprobant? My what? It's that sheet of paper that says that you are officially dead. You should have one. No, I do not have anything, I just appeared here. The creature looks like it is a long day and he has had it with this crap, so it says you don't have one. No. And you don't appear in the system either. Well, leave. What? Leave. And I woke up. No fever, no sickness, nothing, I was cured. A friend of mine says those were Wendigos. I say they are Xoloitzkintles in their true form. Anyway, moral of the story, do not lose your papers if you die, otherwise I'm pretty sure I walked through purgatory. Also, try to die with a book on your pocket. Imagine dying and winding up having to navigate a bureaucracy run by annoyed mythical creatures. Geez, that's nightmare material. Won't be seen. But when I worked at a grocery store, there was one guy who was there shopping that had the worst energy about him. The closer I got to him, the more off I felt and wanted to cry. He wasn't even doing anything but standing with his back to me at the deli counter, but the energy this guy was giving off was pure evil, and it made me sick. I've never encountered anyone since who had that energy. This happened to me one time in an elevator at a local college I was visiting. I was standing there with my boyfriend and a middle-aged average looking guy walked in. I suddenly had, similar to what you're saying, felt pure evil radiating off of him, and felt for sure he had murdered someone. I clapped my boyfriend's hand, my own hand sweating, anxiously waiting to when we could get off that elevator. Never experienced that again, thank God. I've had a really similar experience. I was sitting on the tram on my way home. It's middle of the day, so I'm not particularly on guard or wary, and this dude sits down across the aisle from me. I took one look at him, and immediate chills and feeling of dread. I actually shivered. He just looked like a completely normal, average dude, but something was really off about him. Last night, sitting on the couch with 3 friends, and the remote that was sitting on the table just starts to vibrate. From slow to fast. I point to it, my other friend notices and gets freaked out, and the other 2 had no idea what we were talking about as they were engaged in a conversation. They thought we were insane when we tried to explain what had happened. Nothing else on the table moved. It's not a vibrating remote either. We couldn't recreate it at all. When I was a little kid, my dad and I would often sit on the front steps just before my bedtime. He'd just let me rattle on about whatever was on my mind. I always looked forward to it. So one night we are sitting there, and a big ball of light, sort of a pale yellowish color, flies over the house. It was moving fast and made no sound we could hear. It was headed straight north and quickly vanished over the trees across the street. I was predictably excited, jumping up and pointing at it. Dad calmly took me by the hand and herded me into the house. He had a brief hushed conversation with Mom, and I got put to bed. Next morning when I brought it up they said I must have dreamed it. Years later Dad admitted that yeah, he saw it too, but he still wouldn't talk about it. My childhood house has been passed down from generation to generation for about 100 years now. For the longest time we knew something was going on that we couldn't see but felt it. When I was about 11 years old my grandmother passed away. About 6 months later, while our family was eating dinner everyone at the dinner table heard my grandmother's voice upstairs. We checked the entire house, empty except for us. We have no logical explanation for what we heard. Edit. Wow. 50 upvotes. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much. A few years ago I was sitting on the couch with my little brother. I was holding my old black rubber iPod case. I accidentally dropped it on the carpet, but when I bent down to pick it up, it had completely vanished. I looked everywhere for it. Under the couch, under the cushions, under me, under the carpet, but nope, it was gone. I looked for it every day but no luck. Then a few weeks later I found it behind one of the couch legs. I don't know how it got there, and I'm 100% sure that I checked there before. I brushed it off that my little brother kicked it. But now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure he was sitting on my knee or right beside me, still kinda spooked. I remember it was during a drought in California around a decade ago. I woke up one morning and our entire backyard was overgrown with grass and weeds, when the previous day it was barren completely. We had no milk in the fridge, but had gained a jug of fruit punch, an entire unto-shade gallon. My dad drove me to the store to go get more milk, and we were talking about how much we loved the stuff and how it's one of the only things we always keep in the house and never let go empty. We pull into the parking lot of our nearby Savmart and look at the license plate of the car in front of us as we're finding a spot. Something along the lines of I love / like milk to can't remember the exact sequence of digits. I was a kid. We both were stunned speechless and brought it up in shock for years to come. This sounds pretty silly, but one night during winter break back in 2008, I was playing Gears of War 2 with my cousin online. It was around 1 AM and my uncle told him to turn it off and go to bed. I went upstairs to go to the bathroom. My room was in the basement, and I looked out of the back door and saw the biggest and brightest full moon I have ever seen. It was like an orange color too. I used the bathroom, and when I came out I went to look at it again, but it was completely gone. There was no cloud in the sky, but the moon I saw just vanished. Completely clear night, and I felt so weird that the moon just disappeared. I even went outside to look past the house to see it and couldn't. I've told this to people over the years and everyone just says that there probably were clouds and they blocked the moon. I shrug it off too because like I said, it's something silly. A few months ago I was looking at my achievements on Xbox and looked at Gears of War 2. The night I was playing with my cousin was December 30th, 2008. So I decided to look up the phase of the moon for that day, and it was a waxing crescent, not even close to a full moon. So I really have no idea what I saw in the sky that night. I've posted about this before, and this is the very short version, but I was chased through my neighborhood one night by a guy screaming incoherently at me. The night before, I'd had a very intense and frightening nightmare about being chased through the dark in my neighborhood by a terrifying man. I've never had a dream like that before or since. I've had a few other seemingly precognitive dreams through the years, always about something unusual and highly emotionally charged that happened the day after. But that one topped them all. I had been so shaken by the nightmare that I drew a picture of it the next morning and told my husband about it. The day after that, after the dream had seemingly came true, it struck me that I'd somehow documented it in advance and flipped back a day in my sketchbook. Even my husband, not given to believing wacky things, was floored. The first and only time I had sleep paralysis was in 8th grade, and in it, something bit my arm and my forehead. When I woke up, I had a splitting headache right around where the thing would bit me, and my arm was bleeding a little bit. One time I woke up, and I say that loosely because it felt more like a fog or dream state, to see a figure in my doorway pressing a finger to its lips and saying shh, it's just me. I went back to sleep. When I woke up there was a trail of dust/dirt, almost like footprints around my bed. There was no sign of break-in. None of my doors led outside. I know it wasn't like that when I went to bed, because it was noticeably dirty/weird. A few years ago I was plugging in an oven in a bakery when I got shocked by it. I had been leaning over a metal table to get to the outlet and still had one hand on it, so the electricity went straight up my arm, across my chest/heart, and down the other arm. It had some higher volatile to it too. There were a few mysterious things that happened then. I didn't die. In fact there was nothing wrong at all. I didn't fall down. I didn't pass out, and other than some internal scarring and a few panic attacks I walked away with no issues. I teleported. I have no idea how or why, but I know I did. See, there was another table maybe a foot behind me, and 1 second I'm plugging in the outlet and the next thing I know I'm standing on the other side of that table that was behind me and at least 8 feet from the outlet. Even my mom, who was pretty close to me, swears that 1 second I was in one spot and then suddenly I was another. This happened relatively recently, mid 2020, and I still have no idea what it could have been. Jump to bottom for my mom's decent burn. I was laying down in my bed because I had a nondescript headache, like a regular stuffy pressure headache, and was going to nap for a few hours. Eventually I started feeling like I was falling forward, but not upward. Somehow, I sleep on my back, so it was an extra weird/confusing sensation. But it legit felt like I was suspended while leaning forward over an edge, if that makes sense. After a minute or so, I felt like I was underwater and/or sleep paralysis. I couldn't move anything, but my arms and torso were slowly tensing up. I couldn't open my eyes, but I was seeing dark blue something, like those old visuals on media player when you listen to music. Anyway, while my legs are frozen and my upper body is tensing, I could feel my arms slowly lifting straight up, not toward my head, like toward the ceiling. While my forearms are lifting, my shoulders, back, abs, and pecs are all tensing, and all feel like they are pulling inward to my sternum. All the while I'm completely awake/aware, but can't open my eyes. I have no way to confirm it, but it felt like maybe 2 to 3 minutes of this. My breathing is getting rapid while everything is tensing, but I wasn't having a panic attack. My arms and chest started shaking, not violently, but more like a rumbling vibration. The shaking/rumbling was only for a few seconds and then, suddenly, my eyes shot open. I was trying very hard to open them this whole time, in time to see my hands/forearms in the air, fingers fully outstretched. Then, in another instant, my arms dropped, my body untensed, and I could move again. Immediately after, and for the following day, I was completely exhausted/fatigued. I called my mom to tell her about it, so she/I could consult some of her doctor friends. She worked in a neurologist office within a hospital, so easy access to docs, and I also went in to see my PCP the next day to get an EKG and EEG. Every doc said it wasn't a seizure, and the heart/brain stuff came back normal. The best answer I could get was it's probably nothing to worry about if it doesn't happen again. And the burn I promised, after all the docs came up with bupkis. I was talking to my mom about it again, and she said, maybe you were getting abducted by aliens and they gave up cause they couldn't lift you. I have a few actually, all from when I was a kid. One time I went to sleep on a Monday and woke up Thursday. I had no recollection of the past 2 days, but according to my mother I had been acting normal and going to school just fine. Once I woke up to hear loud knocking on my door super clearly, but there was nobody there. The knocking was what woke me up in the first place, and it didn't seem familiar to me at all. Also, I wasn't having a dream where someone knocked on a door, so I don't know what happened. Nobody was at the front door either. I moved to a new apartment and there was a spider on my wall. I was afraid of spiders, to the point I didn't even like killing them, but this one wasn't moving, and appeared to already be dead, so I named him Gerald, and he lived with me. After a month he started moving about 2 centimeters every day. I wouldn't see him move, but he would be in a different area of his corner every day. One day I opened my bedroom door to find Gerald alive and moving, also hanging upside down, seeming to be trapped in a web or something. Since I was still scared of spiders, I ran to get my mom, and she killed Gerald with a broom. TL. Doctor being a kid sure is weird. I would hear the doorbell ring in the middle of the night. No one else heard it, and the dog didn't bark, but I know that I wasn't dreaming. Also, a few times there were loud knocks on my bedroom door but no one was there. This one experience is going to bother me for the rest of my life. I lived in an old apartment in downtown, near Portland, Oregon. The building was built around 1920. Anyway, I had a Monday morning off work and decided to do laundry. It was a quiet morning. The thing that sucks about these old buildings is usually coin-op laundry in a basement. I gathered my bed sheets and a large blanket. I had a laundry pod on the top and grabbed a few quarters. I walked down the stairs that are immediately to the right of my front door. I didn't pass anybody going up or down, just little old me going down alone to do laundry. No big deal. I get into the basement and I put my bed sheets in the washer, realized my large blanket wouldn't fit. It's okay, one load of sheets, one wash by itself with the blanket. I was putting in the quarters one by one and realized I was short by 1/4. Walked immediately up the stairs, again didn't pass anyone, and there is only one entrance into the basement. Grabbed a quarter in my living room, went right back downstairs. Came back down to the basement, and my large duvet blanket wasn't on the floor anymore in front of the washer, where I left it. It was folded perfectly on a folding table across the basement on the other side. This was far, not immediately next to the washer, across the entire basement. This was a heavy ass blanket. That would take enough time where I'd walk in on someone attempting to fold it, since my apartment door was right outside this basement. No one came down there. I would have passed them. After this I learned my apartment was extremely haunted, but just seeing stuff happened. Like walking shadows, etc. Not actual physical objects moving around. I know 10,000% that was not normal, and I have zero way to explain it to this day. And yes, I moved. Some kid that I knew back in like first grade. We would always talk and our parents knew each other, but I brought them up in a conversation and we found no trace of the kid at all, like nothing. My parents even said that whole family didn't exist. To this day I'm still confused on how the hell I remember this kid so vividly, but he never existed. This happened to me this past Friday. I dropped my youngest son off at school and came back home. It was trash day, so I had wheeled out the bin to the end of our driveway and came back into the house, locking the door behind me. I went down the hall to my bedroom and into my bathroom to wash my hands. While I was drying them, I heard the sound of a TV come on. I frowned and wondered if my eldest son had come back from class early. It was only around 8:30 am and I didn't expect him home till about 10:30 am. I walked down the hall and realized the sound of the TV was from the one in the study. Lights were off, but you could see the flicker of the TV on the wall. I turned on the lights and walked in. The TV was definitely on. LOTR Return of the King playing. I was stumped. When I left to drop off my son at school, we were the last ones out of the house and the TV was definitely not on. Likewise when I came in, after dropping him off, to gather up a last load of trash before stuffing into the bin outside and wheeling it out to the street. I searched for the remote, top of the bookshelf, and was about to turn it off when the TV screen went dark. Frowning, I pressed the power button and the TV came back on, no problem, but to the menu page. Not wanting to waste any more time with it, I turned the TV back off, set the remote back down on the bookshelf, and went about my business. Later that morning, when my eldest son came home, I was on the brink of mentioning the odd TV thing to him while he ate a snack I prepared for him when we both heard the TV come on in the study. He was sitting at the kitchen island and I was opposite him, putting things away, and we both just froze and looked in the direction of the study. He laughed a little. "What the heck?" "Yeah," I replied. "Happened earlier today to me too. It's glitching out, I guess." So at least I wasn't alone when it happened.